And so what you end up with is a scene where there's a lot of activity, but not necessarily a lot of action. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are talking about action scenes. Specifically, I want to just focus on 3 elements that really make a great action scene. Now there's a lot we could say about action scenes, and so if you want more information about it, I have an entire workshop on it, which I will link below. I know you hear me say that a lot, but the truth is I have all of these workshops. So I will link it below, and that is really great because it comes with great workbook and class notes so that you can have all of that in front of you to reference and remember, and then immediately put it into action in your story, because you know how big I am on making sure that you can not just learn theory but be very actionable and really start writing your story. So I will link that below. But for today, 3 things that action scenes should have. And the first is they should really be plot focused. I know I sound like just a broken record on this one, just plot focus, plot focus, plot focus, but it's true. It's just important that they be plot focused. And that might sound obvious, but it's actually something that I see frequently, especially when people want to write thrillers or things like that. They want the action. And so what you end up with is a scene where there's a lot of activity, but not necessarily a lot of action. I get into this in my Plot Essentials workshop. You don't want scenes that are just activity scenes where there's just a lot happening. If it is not forwarding the plot, then it's not really a good action scene. It's just a bunch of useless activity. And that actually slows the story down. It does not speed it up. It only speeds it up if it is actually plot relevant. So all of the same things apply. If you've gone through the Great Scenes Mega Course workshop, where we really talk about having specific goals for your scenes and then making sure that you're building each scene into a mini plot, that applies to action scenes. You just simply cannot rest on, oh, okay, it's going to be this really cool battle. That's nice. You can have that battle. But what's the outcome? What's the goal? What's the purpose? What does it lead to? Everything from the Great Scenes Mega Course workshop that I've talked about, and any other videos I've done here on this channel where I've talked about goals for scenes, it matters and it applies to the action scene. So you cannot just say, okay, now there's this racing scene, or now there's this scene of high energy. What is the goal of the scene? What is the mini plot? How does it connect to the scene before it, and how does it lead into the scene after it? All of that matters so very much. Now, you know, and to that point, action scenes they're not always necessarily the same thing. So if you're writing a thriller, you know, if you're writing a Mission Impossible type book or film, you're going to have a lot of these action scenes in the traditional way that we think of action scenes. But action scenes apply to anything. They can apply to a book like Jane Eyre. They can apply to Great Expectations. It's simply a scene that has a lot of movement happening. It's a scene that is meant to have a faster pace and meant to increase tension in the reader. But the amount of tension, the degree of it, and everything else is going to depend on the story you're writing and the style of it and everything else. So just keep that in mind. The second thing that it really should do is develop the character. So in addition to being plot focused, it should be character focused, and the character should be different at the end of that scene in some ways, which goes back to everything I've said about the character arc, and in the sense of a character development means the plot development. The character's development drives the plot. So even while action scenes, it can feel like we're really focusing on that surface level action, you have to keep the character development, at least in a character-driven story, rooted. The character development is still the root of that scene. It just happens to be a very high action scene in which the character is developing. So having an understanding of how that character is different at the end of the scene than at the beginning of the scene is still very germane. Now, a character might change in different degrees. Characters don't always go through immense growth in every scene, but they do need to walk away different. And that could be a change of heart. It could be that they have new information. It could be that because of new information, they've shifted their plan a little bit. It could be that they perceive a different character differently or the world differently. It can be so many things, but you need a sense of that, because your character on page 1 should be different than your character on page 6. I mean, they need to change constantly growing and growing and developing. So make sure that you are thinking in those character terms for your action scenes as well. Again, otherwise they become activity scenes. And then the last thing that I would say is that make sure you're thinking about the odds. An action scene that can be really interesting is one where the characters don't know what's going to happen. If I basically know that Joe is going to succeed, I'm not focused and invested on the action, and my tension isn't up, and so the purpose of the action scene is defeated. The purpose of all this high action is to get the reader in a place where they are more tense. I'm not going to be more tense if I just think it's all going to work out, or if I think I know how it will work out. So I want to go into an action scene saying there are interesting odds here. Maybe this person will come out on top, but maybe this person will come out on top. Or, questioning how are they going to do this? I can see 4 different ways they might go about tackling this problem. Which way are they going to choose, and is it going to work? So you want to set up in the action scene the very likely opportunity that the very likely situation that the protagonist or whoever the reader is sort of rooting for might fail, which means you have to have done a good job of setting up your antagonist or your villain or your opposition, whatever that is. I have an entire workshop on antagonists and villains, which I will link below, but that actually really helps. Making sure that the villain is set up properly is part of what's going to help the action scenes have the degree of tension that you want them to have. Otherwise, those odds and those stakes are not going to be present in the story. So just to recap, you want to make sure it's plot focused. That means making sure that scene has its own goal, and that scene, all of those have variety. Make your action scenes have variety, but it's a mini plot scene. It has its own goal. Keep it plot focused. That means 2, it's developing the character. So you want to make sure that character arc is still what is driving the plot. And that can be internal development, external development. That character needs to change. And then 3, thinking about the odds and the stakes of that scene is what's going to help make sure that tension is very high. Now, again, so much more we can say about action scenes. They are a very unique type of scene to write, and so they have their own facets that we really want to focus on, which is why I made it a separate workshop from the Great Scenes Mega Course. But the Great Scenes Mega Course combined with the Action Scene Course are really going to give you a lot of what you need to write your scenes. So I highly recommend both of those workshops. I hope this video was helpful. I hope you are doing well and having a wonderful day. And as always, I wish you well with your writing. Bye.